So we know a Russian offensive is coming. We don't know a lot about it. We know it'll probably last 3 to 6 months. We know the Russians are adding 160,000 new conscripts. We don't know how many of those will be involved or if they'll be involved. We just don't know a lot of things. Anders Buck-Nielsen posted this. Will Russia launch a spring offensive? Putin has a strategic dilemma. Okay, let me set the table. This morning in my daily brief, I talked about this. Reportedly, this is Ukrainian defenders breaking through Russian fortification systems in Belgorod. And so they went through the Dragon's Teeth. They built a bridge over the hole that was there that, was supposed to be keeping them out and pushed through the barriers. And okay, so that's Belgorod. And you know that they were in Kursk. And now you see Ukraine bombing a border checkpoint in Bryansk. And I showed you where Bryansk was. If Kursk is here and Belgorod is below that, Bryansk is all the way up here, and that's right all the way to the Belarusian border. Okay, so this stretches out the front line, and I'm showing you that because that's what Anders Buck-Nielsen is going to be talking about in this little clip of that video. So here I'm going to show you 2.5 minutes or so, maybe 3 minutes of this video here, and I'll link the entire video below so that you can hear how he's processing and thinking about what's about to happen in Ukraine with this new offensive.
I would like to point to 3 challenges for the Russians now that it looks like they are about to restart the offensive.
By the way, I want to give credit to Anton Gurashenko for the subtitles here.
First one is that the Russian army that is fighting in Ukraine today is very different from the Russian army that was there just a year ago or when the offensive started in 2023. It's an army that is heavily affected by attrition and lacking the types of equipment that they used to have. So we're seeing...
Now, there's 2 things with the army that you have to understand. Yes, almost 1 million have been killed. There's 930,000 some odd off the battlefield. And by June, before June, it will probably be 1 million soldiers, casualties, killed or wounded, right? So there's a lot of damage to the army. There's also, as he's just saying, a lot of armor now off the battlefield. But the Russians have learned a lot of lessons about how to fight in Ukraine. So it makes them in some ways more lethal, and in some ways, because of lack of armor, less lethal. Okay, let's continue.
Less and less armor on the front line, and more and more just attacks with dismounted infantry. And that indicates that Russia is approaching a point where there is a shortage of armored vehicles that they can use for these attacks. So the first challenge is the effects of attrition that are evident now that we are into year 4 of this full-scale invasion.
And when you think about how much land Russia has actually gained over the last calendar year, for how many casualties, it's a pitiful, tiny little amount for a huge number of casualties. And this is important to understand.
And this makes it difficult for the Russians to assemble forces for maneuver warfare. The second challenge is that the front line has become very long over the last year. And the fact that the front line is longer is an advantage for Ukraine.
Now, that's why I was showing you that bit about not just Kursk and Belgorod, but what's going up here into Bryansk. I mean, if you stretch out the map, as he's showing you, Bryansk goes all the way up to the Belarusian border. And that's going to be a different story when you stretch out the front line.
A goal for the Ukrainians for a long time to extend the front line and make it longer, and forcing the Russians to spread their forces over a greater area. And this is now a reality. And this
now, doesn't that hurt the Ukrainians as well? Aren't they more stretched out? Yeah, sure. Both sides are stretched out, but it prevents the Russians from being able to mass their forces to really be able to try to punch through in any particular place. And because both sides have eyes in the sky, whether it's satellites or whether it's drone technology, you can kind of see if something's going to mass. So it spreads both sides thinner, and that works to Ukraine's advantage more than it works to Russia's advantage. So it's a really interesting thought about what's about to pop off when it pops off. There's going to be an offensive, but what it'll look like or how sustainable it will be for the Russians is going to be the question.
eases the pressure on individual parts of the front line and makes it more difficult for the Russians to achieve breakthroughs. The last challenge I will mention is that the Ukrainian defenses benefit from the developments in drone technology because they favor the defensive fight more than the offensive one.
And this is why I spend so much time talking about drones. Drones are the big innovation in this war, just like IEDs were the big innovation in Afghanistan and Iraq. And in World War II, tanks were the big innovation, and airplanes. And so we're seeing a mutation in warfighting moving forward, and drones are just it's just a significant feat, and they're moving toward a place where a few months ago they were talking about we can have 4 million drones produced in Ukraine, and now it's looking like it's going to be 5 million. So that's a big difference.
And this means that while there are these effects of attrition, that it's becoming more and more visible on the Russian forces, and they have a shortage of armored vehicles for attacks and those things. But then the trend is also moving towards stronger defenses on the Ukrainian side. Mm-hmm. So that's another negative for the Russians. And it indicates that this trend towards a more stable front line, which the Ukrainians are able to hold, it might be the new norm due to these developments in drone warfare. I think
now those developments in drone warfare are like using drones like combined arms in order to they're shorter on artillery, or have been shorter on artillery, but they've been able to be more precise with artillery because of drones, or to attack directly with drones. The trucks coming to supply them from the back, from the rear to the front lines, that sort of thing. So the drone warfare has been remarkable, and it has been effective against the Russians.
I think it looks difficult for the Russians to re-energize their offensive. They might be able to throw some more resources into it sort of for a while, and that can maybe create some territorial gains. But I think the overall trend is toward it becoming more and more difficult for them to make progress on the front line. And most importantly, what it means is that the fighting on the front line will become more and more manpower intensive. The whole war narrative is built around the idea that they make progress and they are a great power that can beat the small state, and that things might be difficult, but victory is inevitable, right? It's waiting out there for them.
But is that what's happened in 2024? I mean, 2023 was looking bleak. 2022 was bleak at first, and then it was like, whoa, they pushed back and they did this. And then 2023, that counteroffensive where they couldn't get through the lines, but the Ukrainians couldn't get through the Russian lines, but the Russians aren't really able to push forward either. And that's the big story here.
So the moment they stop making progress, it seriously challenges Putin's whole war narrative. Mm-hmm. And that's why he will be willing to throw almost whatever resources that are necessary into the war just to make sure that the Russian army keeps advancing. But of course, Putin's problem is that he doesn't actually have endless resources. The Russian economy is struggling. But in the short term, I think it looks like they have the resources that they can throw into a spring or summer offensive. So I think it's very likely.
Yeah, there is a spring or summer, or spring into summer, maybe even into fall counteroffensive, or offensive, not counteroffensive, Russian offensive that is coming. I would be, if I was a betting man, I would put a lot of money on that. Something's coming, but how sustainable will it actually be?
That this is going to happen. It's something that Putin must do, because the story about Russia making constant progress is very important for his war narrative. So he will be willing to throw significant resources into re-energizing the Russian offensive.
Okay,
I would like to point
I think that was a great deal of insight in just a few minutes. If you want to see the whole video, here it is. I will post this below. Anything that Anders Puck Nielsen puts out is well worth viewing. Please subscribe to his channel if you want to get this kind of insight. Thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, and the subscribes, and the coffees. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.